We've all heard Billie Eilish's song about it, but what actually happened to the man who saved the world? Well, we don't actually know, because he was so ashamed for his actions, he changed his name and moved somewhere else. Okay, we do know what happened, we just haven't really told his story. So here is the story of the man who saved the world. On September 26, 1983, the Soviet military's early warning system deep in the heart of Russia blared its sirens. It was the middle of the night. The flashing lights illuminated the face of Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, who was sitting at his desk trying to make sense of what was happening. His hands were steady, his breathing even. But behind the calm exterior, he was feeling very uneasy. The situation was far from normal. In front of him were rows upon rows of blinking lights, each one representing a different part of the Soviet Union's vast nuclear defense system. Each light was either green or red. Green meant all was well. Red meant something was wrong. And right now, those rows of lights were flashing ominously red. They were telling him that in a matter of minutes, the United States had launched 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles, each capable of carrying several nuclear warheads. These missiles were hurtling towards the Soviet Union at a speed of over 14,000 miles per hour. If they reached their destination, they could obliterate Moscow and the surrounding areas. It was every citizen's worst nightmare. This was the height of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union had been locked in a deadly embrace for decades, threatening to destroy each other at any moment. This early warning system was designed to give the Soviets just enough time to launch a retaliatory strike if the unthinkable ever happened. But right now, the system was screaming that the unthinkable was happening. There was no time to waste. Petrov had to inform his superiors immediately. But as he looked at the system in front of him, he hesitated. He knew how sensitive the equipment was. He knew how many false alarms they'd had before, and he knew how close the world had come to being destroyed. The last thing he wanted to do was waste everyone's time with another false alarm. He took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. He knew that his decision would have far-reaching consequences, possibly the fate of the entire world. But he also knew that he couldn't afford to let his emotions get the better of him. This was a decision that had to be made quickly and efficiently. As he sat there contemplating his options, his mind raced. What if this was a real attack? Would he be able to live with himself if he didn't report it? What if it was a false alarm? Would he be branded a coward for ignoring the system? He needed to make a decision. The fate of millions, perhaps billions of people rested on his shoulders. Then he made his choice. He decided to wait and see if the missiles would actually reach their destination. He knew that the missiles would detonate within minutes of reaching the Soviet territory and cause massive destruction. He also knew that if this was a false alarm, then reporting it could trigger a massive panic and lead to untold chaos. With his decision made, Petrov waited. The minutes ticked by like hours. He watched the lights, listened to the beeps and boops of the system, hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. He knew that he might be making the most important decision of his life, but he was determined to do what he thought was right. As the first few minutes passed without incident, Petrov felt a sense of relief wash over him. He knew that if this was a false alarm, then he would have made the right call, but he also knew that there was still time for the missiles to reach their destination. Then, just when he was starting to relax a bit, the system beeped again. This time, it was a different sound, a sound that meant that more missiles had been detected. Petrov's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the lights and saw that they were still green. The missiles hadn't reached their destination yet, but that meant that he had even less time to make a decision. Now, it wasn't just the fate of millions, but potentially the fate of billions that rested on his shoulders. He had to make the right call this time. He couldn't afford to be wrong. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. He knew that panicking wouldn't help anyone. He had to think clearly and make the right decision. But what was the right decision? Should he report the missiles, or should he wait and see? He thought back to the previous alert and the false alarm that followed. He knew that the system wasn't perfect and that it had made mistakes before, but he also knew that this was a matter of life and death. In the end, he decided to wait. He decided to trust his instincts and hope that the system was wrong. He knew that he might be putting the world at risk, but he also knew that he couldn't afford to make a mistake. And as the minutes ticked by, he watched the lights, listened to the beeps and boops of the system, hoping that his decision would be proven right. The silence was deafening. Each second that passed without incident brought him closer to making the right call. But he knew that there was still time for the missiles to reach their destination. Then suddenly, just when he was starting to relax a bit, the lights flashed red. One of the missiles had reached its destination. Petrov's heart skipped a beat. He knew that this was it. The moment of truth had arrived. He looked at the other lights and saw that they were still green. Only one missile had reached its destination. He had made the right call. The world was safe. Relief washed over him. He had made the right call. He had saved the world. But he knew that no one would ever know. He had taken a risk, and it had paid off, but he had also put the world at risk. He knew that he would never be able to forget what had happened that night. He had been the one to make the call that had saved the world. But he was also the one who had put it in danger. And as the adrenaline started to fade and the reality of what had happened started to set in, he knew that he would never be the same again. So in the end, the world would never know the name of the man who saved it. He was a simple soldier, a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet military, but that night he had become something more. He had become a hero. He had been faced with the most difficult decision of his life, and he had made the right call. He had saved the world, but he would never get the recognition he deserved. What's your opinion? Would you have done the same thing? Let us know in the comments. It's hard to imagine the kind of pressure that Petrov must have been under. The fate of the world literally rested in his hands. To make matters worse, he was only 34 years old and had been in his job for less than a year. He must have felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. It's amazing to think that a single person could make a decision that could have saved so many lives. Petrov was just doing his job, following his training and trusting his instincts. But the fact that he was able to remain calm and level-headed in such a high-pressure situation is truly remarkable. It's also interesting to note that Petrov was never given any official recognition for his actions. He was actually reprimanded for not following protocol and reporting the alert. It wasn't until much later that his actions were recognized, and he was given the title of Hero of the Russian Federation. I think this story is a reminder that sometimes the people who make the biggest difference in the world are the ones who don't seek recognition. Petrov was just a simple soldier who did his job, but he ended up saving countless lives. He's a true hero. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave a comment. We'll be sure to respond to your comment, and make sure to watch our other videos, which are just as exciting. See you next time.